Insurance is a gamble. Should we be gambling with matters such as our own health? Healthcare is accessible to everyone. I've heard my mother say this to me dozens of times. Usually she will elaborate that if someone is in critical condition, they can always go to an emergency room, even if they do not have any health insurance, and that they could choose to not pay their hospital bills if they can't afford it. Those expenses would then be added to the hospital costs of those who do pay their bills. After all, she explained, this is already how it works. Something needs to change about our system of health care in America. But how? We can't go to socialism. Socialism is un-American. America has never been socialist and never will be. As opposed to free enterprise, socialism is when an institution is publicly owned and operated by the government, rather than a private business. And instead of selling goods or services to the public for revenue, everything is funded by taxes. But basically, the public education system. The faculty and staff are all paid from our tax dollars, and no one has to pay out of pocket to enroll. But could you imagine if there was no public school? Think of how much money we could save on our property taxes. You could buy a new car. But what are your kids going to do? It would be illegal for them to not go to school, so you would have to pay for them to go to a private school, and that can get expensive. Once you see how it adds up at the end of the year, no extra cash to get that car anymore. Well, then surely it is a good thing that we have public schools. We know that they are learning the same things as every other kid in the country, doing math, reading books, writing essays, the normal school stuff. Do you know exactly what your kids are being taught at school? Have you looked into the credentials of their teachers? Did you shop around all of the schools in a 25-mile radius looking for the perfect fit for your child? Probably not. You are busy, and that's not your job, that's someone else's job, to create curriculums and make sure certain standards are met, and to make sure that the teachers have the right credentials and are teaching the students well. There's a whole system already in action that you trust to put your kids in, and your parents trusted enough to put you in, and we would be best off sticking with that, even though it is completely run by the government. Public schools must be an exception, then. Other than that, no socialism in America will be tolerated. We need to pass a law which will make it illegal, and then the cops will enforce the law because they work for the government. Huh? Hold on a second, let me think this through. Is that socialism, or am I making this up? I don't know. Oh gosh. Just don't panic. Take a second. Breathe. Okay, where were we? Right, let's go back to the meaning of socialism. Socialism is when an institution is publicly owned and operated by the government, rather than a private business. And instead of selling goods or services to the public for revenue, everything is funded by taxes. As far as I'm aware, our taxes pay for the police department, and police officers are employed by the city government. So then the police department is technically an example of socialism, just like public schools. But what if they weren't? Could we have a privatized police department? Or a privatized fire department? Imagine if you had to look up the number to the closest police department if someone broke into your house. The police get to your house and you file a police report. Then the police officer tells you that he will do the best he can and hands you a bill for $1,200. Or imagine if your house caught on fire and you call the closest fire department. On the phone, you tell them your home address and you tell them to hurry. But first, they need to get your home insurance information. The firefighters are sitting in their break room, watching TV right down the road, while your whole house nearly burns down because none of the fire departments in your area accept your home insurance. The closest one that you could get to come out was so far away that barely any of your house was left by the time they got there. They still put out the little fire that remained and they try to hand you the bill, but you stop them saying, "No, no, no, I have house insurance. I don't have to pay anything." But then you find out that you have to pay your deductible before the coverage will kick in. You weren't able to pay for very good insurance with how little you saved without having to pay the 8% city sales tax. See, privatizing schools, the police department, or the fire department could cost us more and restrict access to these for many. It is a good thing that these are publicly owned and operated by the government. To get an idea of what it would really be like if these things were privatized, we could think of another institution that already is. College tuition costs have been left in the hands of the private market, and now there is an epidemic of student loan debt in this country. K through 12 schooling, however, has been left in the hands of the government, and somehow there is no problem with financing in that area. Nobody is in debt because of elementary school, middle school, or high school. We don't have to pay directly for services from the police or fire department, yet they show up in no time. We all pitch in and hand our money over to the government to take care of these things. And while they may not be perfect, these things are certainly taken care of. And no money gets lost either. Everything you pay to the city goes to the city. You may think the city wastes some of what you give them, but what happens to the money you spend on medical insurance when it doesn't get used? Well, if you didn't need to go to the doctor this year, then the money you paid will pay for someone else's medical costs. And if something terrible happens to you next year, then any extra money in the system will pay for your costs, right? That is the idea behind insurance. In an ideal world, there would be enough money to pay for everything and everyone would be covered. So what about the insurance companies? What's in it for them? Surely they are making profits off of doing all of this, or they would not be in the business of doing it. So that means that some portion of the money that you pay for health insurance isn't going to any kind of doctor, nurse, hospital, or anyone actually in the medical field. But there are lots of insurance companies who have to pay lots of employees and their other costs of running their businesses. After they pay everyone they owe, you bet they are profiting in the end. According to Merck Manual Consumer Version, in the United States, administrative costs mostly related to private insurance account for 20 to more than 30% of healthcare costs. Why are they even getting any of the money that you are paying towards your own healthcare? If the healthcare industry was publicly owned and operated by the government and financed by tax dollars, then everyone would have to pay their fair share, and everything would go to the healthcare industry. No money would go to the insurance industry. No one would get a better deal on their plan than you, and no one would be able to escape all responsibility by simply not paying their hospital bills, pushing that burden onto people like you. They say there are two things in life that are certain: death and taxes. And that is great news. I'm tired of people not pitching in. As things progress into the 21st century, everything is becoming more elite, top of the line, and state of the art. The middle class is diminishing because some people want to make America something that not even Americans can afford. They want to drive up the costs of everything because they love to make money, and it feels like it is becoming harder and harder to make ends meet. And that is just ridiculous. We are living in a land of abundance. Technology is through the roof. If people could afford to go to the doctor in the 80s, then we should be twice as able to see a doctor now, not less able. Well, in the worst case scenario, just like with public schools, the government will do a fine job of dumbing down and standardizing this so that it is accessible to everyone. I would gladly have that rather than gambling with these insurance regimes.